BookTube, and welcome to another weekly reading vlog. I've been working on these 3 books this week. But first, I have picked up a new book. This is Tides of War by Steven Pressfield. So, I've been reading the Thomas Cromwell trilogy by Hilary Mantel the past couple months. Get around to talking about this in just 1 minute. But as I've been reading it, I've been going back through my reading list for the past few years and have realized that it's been a few years since I've read any historical fiction. I mean, this is the first historical fiction I've read in 2 or 3 years now, which made me a little bit sad when I realized that, because once upon a time, I used to love historical fiction. That was kind of like my first love of history. And so I thought to myself, I really should read more historical fiction. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm always thinking to myself, I should always be reading more of everything. But historical fiction was what was on my mind. Now, in Vietnam, in the used bookshops, you never know what you're going to find. But I got lucky. I was checking out Book Street this week. And, I say this every time. I really shouldn't be buying any more books because I've got tons of unread books on my shelves already. But I told myself I'm just going to browse Book Street. I'm not going to buy anything unless I see anything I really want. But then when you're in a used bookshop, especially in a city like Ho Chi Minh City, if you see something that you're interested in, you've got to grab it because it's not going to be there next week. So I saw this Tides of War. So it's historical fiction. It's by Steven Pressfield, who I believe is very famous for Gates of Fire, which I've not read, but I've had recommended to me by a couple of people. Gates of Fire. But this book was on the Peloponnesian War, which I'm interested in. I just finished and reviewed a history of the Peloponnesian War earlier this year. When I say I'm interested in it, it means I'm developing an interest in it. I haven't read widely on it yet, but I'd like to. So, and this is a historical novel about Alcibiades, whose name I definitely recognize from the history of the Peloponnesian War. Alcibiades was one of the more infamous figures in that war for a variety of reasons, but I guess the most notorious one was he switched sides a number of times. So, if you had asked me what kind of historical fiction I'd be looking for, I would have said, well, I don't know. If there's something on the Peloponnesian War, that would be great. And here we go. Historical novel right in the area of history I'm looking for. I was a little bit hesitant to buy this because I thought, it's probably part of a series. And, this is probably book 3 out of a 5-book series. But I Googled it while I was standing in the used bookstore. And I looks like this is the only book. It's not part of a series. This is just a one-off. I mean, the author has done other historical fiction, but this isn't part of any larger series. So I've got this, and like I said, I've got a lot of unread books on my bookshelf, but I think this one I might get around to sooner rather than later. Like once I finish Hilary Mantel's Cromwell trilogy, I might move into this one. Speaking of Hilary Mantel's Cromwell trilogy, I continue to be enjoying that. So I'm making good progress on this book. I was on page 70 last week. I read up to page 346. So that's, what is that? That's about 270 pages, roughly, right? That's a good reading week for me. 200 pages in a week is good for me. And as I've been reading this, I have once again been following along with Steve Donahue's videos. Steve Donahue did this as one of his book club books earlier this year. The videos are now all a few months old, but they're still up on YouTube. So I've watched, finished the first 100 pages, watched his part 1 video, finished the second 100 pages, watched his part 2 video, finished the next 100 pages up to 346, and watched his part 3 video now. And yeah, I find Steve's videos very entertaining. One, just because he's such a energetic speaker. He's definitely a talker by nature, so his videos are entertaining. But he also knows a lot, so it's good to hear his expertise on this. Now, I as a new reader and somebody who doesn't know a lot, I of course run the risk of being overly influenced by Steve's opinion, but there you go. So this book deals with the fall of Anne Boleyn, which is where the drama starts getting really juicy, because not only Anne Boleyn dies, but there's this whole ring of other courtiers who are drawn up in the net with her, accused of adultery with Anne Boleyn, like 5 or 6 other guys who get killed at the same time. So it's a drama that ends with a lot of bloody death. So this is where the soap opera starts getting juicy. No wonder the Tudor era is such a magnet for historical fiction writers. I mean, as Steve says in his videos, there have been a lot of historical fiction about this period. I haven't read widely on it, although I did watch the Tudors TV show a number of years ago, and I don't remember it in detail, but do remember that there are a lot of people killed along with Anne Boleyn. So yeah, it has the potential to be a juicy drama about all these people headed towards their doom. But what is either interesting or aggravating about these books, depending on your point of view, is Hilary Mantel is providing, I think, what Steve Donahue calls an intensely personal portrait of Cromwell. So you get all these descriptions of Cromwell's family and his home and his household. You get long passages describing Cromwell's thoughts and his relationships. And there can be long stretches where the plot really isn't going anywhere, where we're just seeing the world through Cromwell's eyes in this intensely personal portrait. And that is obviously why all the critics love the book. But it also can create a sense of like, will you just get to the good stuff already? It's just moving so slow. Although I am now nearing the end, and I am where the good stuff is starting to happen. Like the nooses are being drawn. The Cromwell is rounding up the people accused of adultery next to Anne Boleyn. Now, as I've been reading this, I've been keeping my eye on Wikipedia to kind of see what the fates of all these people were or end up being. And maybe I should remember this because I saw the Tudors TV show, but I don't remember. I don't remember it. It was some 10 years ago. You know how it goes. I remember her brother, George Boleyn, got caught up, but I don't remember the other courtiers who got caught up in this particularly well or at all. So I'm reading their names in the book and I'm checking Wikipedia as I go, and like, oh, okay, this guy ends up getting killed, this guy ends up getting killed, this guy ends up getting killed. And it does sound, based on Wikipedia, and I know, yeah, it's Wikipedia, but that's what we use nowadays, isn't it? It does sound like, based on Wikipedia, that Cromwell just made up or manufactured charges against these guys because he wanted them out of the way, which is what Steve Donahue says in his videos, that the historical Cromwell was a vicious thug, a knee breaker, Steve calls him, who had these guys killed. But the Cromwell in this novel is much more sympathetic. So it's interesting. Steve said in his videos, and I would concur with this, as you read this, you know what's coming, right? You've looked ahead on Wikipedia. And so you're thinking to yourself, okay, how is Cromwell going to come out sympathetic in this, given what we know the historical record is? And then you read it and you see the little twists and turns that Hilary Mantel puts on it. Twists and turns which I believe are not an outright contradiction of the historical record, but just, I think she calls it in her afterword. I've gone ahead and read the afterword, even though I'm not finished with the book, just because with historical fiction, I figure it's justified that there's not spoilers with historical fiction in the same way. She says, in this book, I try to show how a few crucial weeks might have looked from Thomas Cromwell's point of view. I'm not claiming authority for my version. I am making the reader a proposal, an offer. Which is what historical fiction does, right? It's not. That's what separates it from history. It's an alternative narrative which fits with the established facts, but may or may not have happened. Interesting to see that aspect of it. There's actually a ton to talk about in the 200 pages I read for today. I mean, Steve Donahue gets 3 30-minute videos out of it. But I'm not going to get sucked into that now. I've got other things to talk about. Journey to the West. As I've been mentioning the last couple weeks, I'm at the my accommodation with this book is I'm just reading one story a week. That was the intent, actually. Last week I got stuck in a coffee shop in the rain, and I actually read 1.5 stories. So this week I'm coming in at halfway through a story where I left it off last week. A lion spirit had stolen the weapons of Monkey, Pig, and Friar Sand and taken them back to his cave. So Monkey, Pig, and Friar Sand now have to go get their weapons back. And there's a usual kind of long story where there's a lot of back and forth here, which is part of the pleasure of reading this book. It's a little bit tiresome to summarize sometimes, depending on what mood I'm in. But when you're reading it, kind of all the twists and turns are what makes it a delightful book. They disguise themselves as some of the minor demons that the lion demon has in his cave. They sneak into the cave. They steal back their weapons. They have a fight with the lion demon. The lion demon fights the 3 of them for some time, but then escapes and goes to his grandfather, which turns out is not his biological grandfather, but an elder demon spirit that he and the other lions have adopted as their grandfather. Goes to the cave where there's 6 other lion spirits. And as I've mentioned before, in the mythology of this book, it appears that any animal or plant can become spirits or demons if they kind of cultivate the way, if they learn the Taoist meditations. So animals or plants can obtain supernatural powers and become spirits or demons. So there are 6 other lion spirits in this cave, and then there's the grandfather, which is a 9-headed lion demon. So they have a number of different battles. Again, it's quite typical in this book. There's a few back and forths. They have a battle, they retreat, they regroup, and they have another battle. But the 9-headed lion demon is able to just capture them with his mouths. and this apparently is something that they don't have a lot of defenses against. So his mouth just stretches out and captures the pig, and captures the friar sand, and captures the monkey. Now, as with a lot of episodes in this book, I think you could nitpick it for inconsistencies if you wanted to. The monkey has the power to make duplicates of himself, which he does do, but he kind of waits to the last minute instead of doing that first off. He also has the power to transform his shape, which again he does do, but he does it after he's been captured. But anyways, Monkey eventually goes up to heaven. He gets a tip off from I believe it was one of the local gods that the 9-headed lion demon is actually an escaped pet from heaven. Now, I've been mentioning in my weekly reading vlogs that this book is very repetitive because it's a collection of folktales, and some of these folktales I think seem to have had common origins or something like that. One of the elements that gets repeated over and over again is how the demon that they're fighting turns out to be an escaped pet of one of the heavenly deities. So this is something that's popped up, I don't know how many times, 5 or 6 times already in this book. But here we have it once again. Turns out that the 9-headed lion demon was the escaped pet of one of the heavenly deities. Monkey goes up to heaven to let him know that his pet has escaped. Now, the pet has only been escaped for 3 days, which is why they haven't noticed yet that he escaped. I guess the keeper of the pet ended up getting drunk and passing out, and the pet escaped. It was only 3 days ago, but a day in heaven is a year on earth. So it means that the lion demon has 9-headed lion demon has managed to set himself up in earth for 3 years. But once the heavenly deity and his servant, the keeper of the lion, realize what's happened, they go down to earth to subdue the 9-headed lion demon and bring him back up to heaven, back into captivity as a pet. And the other lion demons are killed. And that is the end of that section. So that's where I stopped reading for this week. Next up would be chapter 91. And I'm going to continue on with this book. Only 9 more chapters left, but I am committed to taking them slowly at this point. And then Thor. So the part of the Thor I'm reading now, he's Odin has gone mad. Although I think we find out later that it was actually an imposter who took over Odin, or disguised himself as Odin, which is what you kind of suspected was going to happen all along. But Thor and his friends have to fight the forces of Asgard to try and save it from Odin's madness. And there's lots of great scenes of Asgard and battles on Asgard. And it just strikes me as everything you would want from a comic book. Now, I never read Thor as a kid, but I'm trying to make up for lost time now. The great mythical battles against giants and trolls, and Thor with his hammer. Just a lot of fun for those. So I'm continuing to enjoy this. And that's my reading for this week. So thank you very much, and I'll see you again next week, BookTube.